New York City, 1946.
Look, Mr. Gorland, I don't know that much about it.
Merton was sitting in the back room of the clanger, across from what used to be his own seat. Now, Gorland was behind the desk, with Garcia standing to one side, eyeing Merton and tapping a blackjack in his palm, while on the other side was Reggie, a bruiser from the Bronx wearing the doorman's uniform that went with his day job. Gorland knew Reggie from the good old days. He was one of the only people alive that knew Frank's real last name, and he sometimes hired him on as extra muscle. Tonight, Gorland had to put the fear of God into Merton. Harv Merton needed to have more fear for Frank Gorland than for the powerful Andrew Ryan.
I mean, if I knew anything else,
Merton went on, wringing his hands,
I'd tell ya. Hey, you got any hot advice on the horses, Merton?
Garcia asked, grinning. Gorland signaled for Garcia to be quiet. The bookie shrugged, put away his sap, and took out a cigar instead. In the lull, the sound of the bar seeped through the closed door. A girl squealed with laughter, and a man hooted.
Oh, you don't know nothing about Dempsey.
Let's all just think this through, Merton,
Gorland said, pouring Merton a drink from the bourbon bottle.
You're telling me you got a job with Seaworthy on the North Atlantic project from this guy Rizzo. You were working as a steward on one of their ships, right? And they take your ass out to the North Atlantic and keep it there for a month and a half.
You didn't see a thing out there? Gorland shoved the shot glass across the desk, and Merlin snatched it up.
Thanks. That's about the size of it. I mean, some stuff was taken down, under the water, but I didn't go down with it. They were all hush-hush about what was going on down there. Much as your life was worth to talk about it, one fella said, after you come up. I don't know what they're up to.
You see, I know what they're up to. In a general kind of way,
Gorland said, pouring himself a drink.
Building something big. But I don't know what Ryan's angle is. Where's the money? You see him bring up any ore, mining goodies, gold, silver, oil?
No, nothing like that. Just a lot of ships. Never saw Mr. Ryan. Heard his name sometimes, that's all. I was busy the whole time. Seasick, too. I was glad to be back here. Look for another job.
Yeah. You'll live to look for another job, too, Reggie said, helpfully, his voice mild. If you tell Mr. Gorland exactly what he needs to know.
I swear, I didn't find out anything else. I hardly left the galley on the big old ship. Now, Frank Fontaine. He might know something. He's got boats going out there to supply him with fish. And they get to talk more, the guys on the construction.
Gorland frowned, thoughtfully.
Frank Fontaine? Fontaine's Fisheries? He used to smuggle stuff from Cuba up here in those fishing boats of his. Now he's delivering fish? You kidding me?
I saw him on the dock. That's what he told me. I used to buy some of the rum he smuggled up here for your establishment.
Merton swallowed.
Fontaine says there's more money selling fish to Ryan and that crew out there than there is to selling rum to New York. They got a crying need for food out there. Got an army of workers to feed.
Gorland grunted thoughtfully to himself. That did dovetail with what he'd heard at the loading dock. The one sure way to get close to that operation was to supply it. A crazy thought came to him, bringing with it some interesting possibilities. But if he did go that far, and far was the word, alright, he'd be way out of his own stomping ground. He'd be splashing around in the North Atlantic. There was something about this secret project of Ryan's that fascinated him, that drew him in the way rumors of buried pirate gold drew a treasure hunter. Millions of dollars were being sunk into the North Atlantic. He ought to be able to scoop some of it up. Years ago, when Frank Gorland was dodging the law, he'd hopped a freight train. Riding the boxcar, he read an old newspaper about the newly minted industrialist, Andrew Ryan. There was a picture of him, standing in front of a fancy building with his name on it. That picture had stirred something in him. The picture of Andrew Ryan standing there in front of the skyline of Manhattan, like he owned it. It made Frank think,
whatever he's got, I want it. I'm gonna take it from him.
Could be now was his chance. But first he had to figure out what Ryan's angle was. What was he up to? Or down to? Out there with his city, in the cold guts of that dark ocean. Meanwhile, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean.
It's a converted Liberator, really.
Andrew Ryan led Bill McDonough through a big humming aircraft cabin towards the tail.
It's a strato cruiser now. United Airlines has ordered 11 of them for luxury flights, but this is the prototype, of course. This is a prop plane, but the next generation will be jets.
Saw a fighter jet in the war my last trip out,
Bill said.
ME-262 it was. German prototype. Didn't even engage us, I reckon they were test flying.
Yes,
Ryan said distractedly.
Fast and efficient, the jet engine. Haven't bothered developing them, though. Not as aircraft, because after the North Atlantic project, we hope to need no aircraft. We'll have a many great submersibles, and in time, we'll hardly need those. We hope to be entirely self-sufficient.
Submersibles? Bill must have misheard him. Bill had mixed feelings about being on this plane. The drone of its engines was just close enough to the sound of the bombers he'd flown on in the war. He'd taken a ship to get to the USA after. He'd had enough of planes. Saw his best friend turn to red marmalade that last time out. Inside, though, this plane wasn't much like a bomber. Except for the sound, the vibrations through the floor, and the curved inner skin, it could easily be a luxury suite at a hotel. The Victorian-style chairs and sofas were bolted down, but they were luxurious, their silken red cushions trimmed with gold. Lace curtains were elegantly swept back from the windows with silk cords. The cabin was served quietly by 3 liveried servants and a chef. Behind a stainless steel bar, an Asian servant in a red and black jacket with gold braid looked up attentively as they passed. But Ryan wasn't after drinks yet. They passed through a red velvet curtain into an after cabin, smaller, with a metal table bolted to the center of the floor. On the table was a fairly large object, rising like a ghost under a white muslin covering. The room contained almost nothing else, except taped to one interior wall to the left was a full-color drawing of a crowded, highly stylized city. It reminded Bill at first glance of the Emerald City of Oz, only the city in the colorful drawing appeared to be underwater. A school of colorfully sketched fish swam past its windows. Was it Atlantis, the day after it went down? Ryan strode dramatically up to the table and whipped off the cover.
Et voila,
he said, smiling. He had revealed a scale model of the city. It was all one structure, formed of many lesser structures, all in the industrial arts style, as if the designer of the Chrysler Building had made an entire city to go with it. The model was about 3 feet high, a construction of linked towers, sheets of green glass and chrome, transparent tubular passageways, statues, very little open space between buildings. The structure seemed quite sealed off, and indeed, Bill made out what appeared to be airlocks near the bases of several towers, resembling artfully turned lighthouses. Outside the airlock sat the mock-up of a small submarine. Through one of the miniature city's transparent panels, he saw what looked like a tiny bathysphere, partway risen up through a vertical shaft.
This,
said Andrew Ryan, breathing hard as he said it, the muslin sheet dangling at his side,
is Rapture.
A surge of turbulence hit the plane at exactly that moment, making the model city quiver dangerously on its table. Bill stared at it, careful in the turbulence.
Right. Lovely, isn't it?
Rapturous, like. No, Bill. Rapture is the name of this city. What you see here is just the core, the downtown, you might say. Its foundations are already under construction, a habitat for thousands of people beneath the waters of the North Atlantic.
Bill gaped at him.
You're taking a piss.
Ryan flashed one of his pensive smiles.
But it's true. It's being constructed in secret, in a part of the sea rarely plied by anyone. The architecture is glorious, isn't it? The Wales brothers designed it. Greavy's been implementing their vision. And now, so will you, Bill.
Bill shook his head in wonder.
It's being built right now?
The turbulence died down, to Bill's relief. It brought ghostly memories of being in a plane hit by flak.
How big's Rapture to be then?
It will be a small city, hidden away under the ocean. Miles to a side, lots of open space inside it. We don't want claustrophobia.
The model's shape reminded Bill of the densest parts of Manhattan in some ways. All those buildings packed together. But in this case, the buildings were crowded even closer and even more interconnected.
Do you see what's in there? Through that little window.
Ryan pointed.
That is going to be parkland. A park under the sea. I call it Arcadia. We have a system for bringing reflected sunlight down as well as electrical light. Arcadia will help provide oxygen as well as being a place for relaxation. Now here, you see.
He broke off at a sudden rough turbulence and the boom of thunder somewhere close at hand. Both men looked nervously at the window opposite the drawing. Bill put one hand to the edge of the table and ducked to see through the port. Black and gray storm clouds billowed angrily outside, flickering with lightning.
Does your ride coming?
Another boom, another quiver, and Bill closed his eyes, trying to will away the pictures rising in his mind. The boom of a flak shell, the clatter and whine of many small, vicious impacts. Another shell exploding just outside, a section of the bomber hull suddenly gone, blown out by the Jerrys, wind roaring in through the ragged gap like a madhouse invader as Bill McDonough, radio man, sees the curly-headed Welsh lad, a green little blighter, just a week out of training, being sucked backwards against the 5-foot breach in the curved metal wall, pulled hard by the sudden drop in air pressure, the boy's face contorting in terror. Bill shouts to the pilots,
"Reduce altitude!"
as he rushes to the young flyer, gripping a stanchion with his right hand so he could try pulling the Welsh lad back with his left, knowing full well it was no good. The boy screams as the suction around the breach jerks him harder into the jagged edge, the sharp metal ripping through his left shoulder. His blood precedes him, streaming out through the gap. And then he follows it, just gone, like a magic act, vanished into the roaring sky. All that remains are scraps of torn clothes and skin flapping on the ragged edges of the bulkhead. The boy is falling somewhere, out in the gray mist. Bill clings to the stanchion as the bomber angles sharply down to equalize air pressure.
Bill, are you all right?
Bill managed a sickly grin.
That's the reason I took a ship to America instead of a plane, Gov.
Sorry, I'm alright.
I think we both need a drink.
Right you are, Mr. Ryan. That's the very medicine.
Let's have a seat in the main cabin and ride out this storm. We should be at the airport in another hour or so. Winds are behind us, then it's to the ship. Come on. I'll have Quee pour you the best single malt you've ever tasted. And I'll tell you about the Great Chain.
Meanwhile, on Staten Island. The bar was almost deserted tonight, but Captain Fontaine was there, as arranged, sitting in a booth in the dim corner, frowning at his beer, just waiting for Frank Gorland. Captain Fontaine did look a lot like the man who called himself Frank Gorland, but he was more weather-beaten, a little older. He wore a red watch cap and a long green corduroy double-breasted coat. His calloused red hands show a life he'd led at sea, first as a smuggler, now as the head of a small fishing fleet. Gorland ordered a bottle of beer from the stout barmaid who seemed to be flirting with a drunken marine, and carried it over to Captain Fontaine's table. Fontaine didn't look up from brooding on his beer as Gorland sat across from him.
Gorland, seems to me that every time I run into you, something goes wrong.
How's that? What about all that cash you made from what I did for you on your last cargo?
Your cut was near as big as mine, and all you did for it was run your mouth.
Well, running my mouth is how I live, friend. Now look, Fontaine, you want the information I have or not? I'm offering it for free. I'm hoping we can work together again. And we can't do it if you're in jail, so you better cock one of those shell-like ears. I've got word they're gonna wait till you head out, and raid you on the way back. Fontaine slurped at his brew.
They? Who?
Why the... Gorland leaned over the table and lowered his voice. Just the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's who. Agent Voss is chewing at your rump. Fontaine sat up straight. Gorland looked at him calmly, believing it himself, almost, as he said, I got it from my sister's best friend. She's a secretary for him. Keeps an eye on things for me. That was the secret to being a good liar, believing it as you said it. So she's typing up some kind of warrant. And there you are, Captain Frank Fontaine. Smuggling, it says. Drugs, it says.
Keep your voice down. Anyhow, it don't signify. I gave up smuggling that stuff. Company I work for now is bringing me crazy money to bring my catch over to Iceland. Long ways, but it's big money. Safe and legal.
You mean you deal with Andrew Ryan's operation out there? Fontaine shrugged. Nothing you need to know about. So he took the fish out there himself. Interesting. The exact whereabouts of the North Atlantic project would be on the charts in one of those boats. Gorland sighed and shook his head. You don't get it. Voss is out to get you. He's gonna look down in your hold first time you set sea and plant the dope down there. You gave him the slip one too many times.
I don't believe it.
They're raiding you all right. And suppose they don't set you up. They know that Ryan's trying to hide something out there. So they'll take you in for questioning. How's Ryan gonna feel about that? You wanna go to jail for standing in the way of an investigation?
What proof there's a raid coming, Gorland?
Proof? Just a carbon from the raiding order. Gorland passed it over. Every good con man knows a good forger. You can sell your boats to me. Slip off to Cuba. Fontaine looked at the order, and his shoulders slumped.
Maybe it's true. I'm sick of being on those boats. Like to retire to Cuba, but I want a good price.
Sure, I'll give you top money. Fontaine looked at him narrowly.
And why would you be so goddamn helpful, Gorland? It don't add up.
It's you they're looking for, not me. I'll play fisherman till things cool off, make some money for Ryan, and have the trawlers for when it's safe to smuggle again. Fontaine expelled a long, slow breath. Gorland knew that meant he was giving in. He felt the physical thrill, an almost sexually delicious inward shiver that always came when a mark surrendered. 2 nights later, Frank Gorland was waiting in the pilot house of a fishing trawler, trying to get used to the smell of old codfish and drinking coffee. The trawler was called Happy Drift. Christ, but it was chilly on this old tub. He heard a hail from the dock and smiled. Captain Fontaine was here for his money. Gorland nodded to his grizzled, gray-haired helmsman and said, When I give you the signal, head due east.
You got it, boss.
Call me Captain. I'm about to be one.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Gorland went down the ladder to the main deck, where he found Fontaine stalking back and forth, scowling.
Gorland, I hear you fired my crew. You're up to something. This whole thing is starting to stink.
Surprised you can smell a stink at this point. But come on down to the galley, I'll explain it. I've got a parcel of money for you there. Gorland turned and went below decks, humming to himself. Fontaine hesitated, then followed. There was no crew staying warm in Happy Drift's little galley. Gorland planned to pick up the rest of the crew later. On a small fold-out table near the stove was a small brown suitcase.
There you are, Fontaine. Open it up. Count it.
Fontaine looked at him, and he looked at the suitcase. Then he licked his lips, went to the suitcase, opened it, and stared. It was filled with dead fish. Red snapper.
I'm thinking,
Gorland said, taking a blackjack from his coat pocket.
of changing the name of this boat to Happy Grift. What do you think?
Captain Fontaine turned angrily to Gordon, who hit him hard with the blackjack. Crack! Right on the forehead. Fontaine went down like a sack of bricks. Gorland put the blackjack away and went to the ladder, climbed to the deck, turned, and waved up at the pilot house, where the helmsman, Bergman, was watching for his signal. The helmsman pointed at the dock, and Gorland remembered he had to cast off. That much he knew how to do. He cast the ropes off, and the boat roared to life, swinging out from the dock towards the open sea. Humming My Wild Irish Rose, Gorland descended to the galley. Captain Fontaine, face down, was still out cold. Gorland went through the man's pockets, removing his identification, money, personal effects. He might need them. He considered Captain Fontaine, now stirring slightly on the deck, and then he muttered to himself,
Do it. Go all the way, Frank.
He took a deep breath, then pulled off his shirt and pants. He dragged Fontaine's outer clothing off of him, then switched clothes with him, wincing at the smell of Fontaine's unwashed trousers. Just a little too large. Had to tighten the belt. Then he used his old clothing to tie Fontaine's hands behind him.
What are you doing?
Fontaine asked, starting to come to.
Let me go. I will let you go.
Right now, Captain, Gorland said.
But you got to climb that ladder. I'll help you. I need clothes. It's freezing out here. You'll be taken care of. Up the ladder.
He got the bleary Fontaine up, at last, and out on the tilting deck. Fog steamed by and wreathed the sea. He glanced at the pilot house. Bergman was facing out to sea. Not that he probably would have cared. The man had done 5 years in prison not so long ago, and he was being well paid. He'd go along with whatever his new boss wanted. Fontaine was swaying on the deck, goggling blearily about him.
We're out to sea. Why are we... I'll show you why, Gorland said, escorting him to the side. You ever notice how much you and I look alike, Frank? We even have the same first name. Possibilities, Frank, possibilities. I've got a whole new concept here. I call it identity theft. What do you think?
Then he bent, grabbed the vessel's former captain by the ankles, and tilted him over the side, head first, down into the cold sea. A yell, a splash or two, and Captain Fontaine went down. He didn't come up. Captain Fontaine was dead. Long live Captain Frank Fontaine.